gratitude that you felt my connection to.
Hello, welcome to CubsPS Plus, a Northside Numbers Game, a weekly podcast that dives headfirst into the analysis of hot topics driving Chicago Cubs baseball. I'm your host, Mike Waller, a lifelong Cub fan, full-time baseball stat nerd, and now again a youth baseball coach. CubsPS Plus is part of the Bleacher Bunch Productions on the Fans First Sports Network, an exciting and expanding group of shows including the Bleacher Bunch, the Sun Ranto Show, Cup of Cubbie Blue, Baseball Rabbit Hole, and Bricks Behind the Ivy. The Bleacher Bunch feed is available wherever it is you get your podcasts, and CubsPS Plus is always available, along with every other show on the network, to Patreon supporters at patreon.com/bleacherbunch, where you can support the show and find a variety of benefits for as little as a few dollars a month. In addition to the podcast feeds, you can also find me on Twitter or X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus, a spin on the baseball metric OPS Plus. Love the pod or hate it, please drop a review wherever it is you find your podcasts. If you've done that, thank you so much. Maybe you can share this episode with a friend. It's April 13th. The Cubs are 10-7, coming off a beatdown of the Dodgers. The offense is playing well. The starting pitching has been solid. But what other options were there this offseason? Today I'm joined by Sara Sanchez, and we get into those options. Are you ready? I'm ready. Here we go. Welcome into episode 107, the Mark DeRosa episode of this podcast. Among other things, this offseason, the Cubs needed to get deeper, and Mark DeRosa was a key guy on the excellent 2008 Cubs team, which is probably the deepest team in my lifetime other than 2016. But we're going to talk about how to rebuild Jed's roster. Sara Sanchez joined me at the end of last season, and we talked about redoing the 2023 offseason, and we had a lot of fun. So, Sara, welcome back. We're going to redo Jed's offseason this year.
Yeah, here for it, and looking forward to chatting about this more with you.
Now, this one, just to kind of set the stage, I think we all know where the Cubs were and what they needed. But unlike the previous offseason, they didn't have 8 to 10 roster spots to fill. I mean, the starting lineup, unless they traded guys away, was kind of full. So I knew when I came into it, I guess, well, let's talk about need first. What I saw was starting pitching as the biggest need. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I think that somewhere between starting pitching and the bullpen, but pitching for sure.
Yes.
And as the offseason went on, I found myself wishing the Cubs would spend just a tiny bit more money to get slightly better arms in those spots,
yes,
and B, sort of wondering why overemphasis on utility player acquisition, and no shade to John Birdie or Vidal Brujan or Gage Workman or any of these guys, but it was just kind of like I understand now they knew that Nico wouldn't be ready for the start of the season, so maybe that was more of a priority for them. But it really does feel like this team prioritized the first 8 games where Nico would not be ready over the last 150 games where they would need a bullpen.
Yes. Well, and I think the big thing this offseason, Jed clearly went for depth. I mean, they have depth of arms, they have depth of middle infielders, they've got depth of outfielders, but he opted for the low to mid side of the market on
always
pretty much across
everything.
The board. Yeah. So just before we get into it, I'll kind of lay the ground rules out. This is what we did last offseason. So the rule is the Cubs were pretty much going to stay under the CBT. So we didn't give ourselves more money to spend than Jed had to spend last year. And this year, I think it was pretty clear that he has the freedom to go up to it, given some of those big contracts he did offer but didn't get the player. So I think the CBT is still a fine threshold to use, even though the Cubs sit about, $30 million under, give or take. So the Cubs can get up to, I've got a calculator going, but where I got them to left about $7 million left for midseason trades, which probably in that 5 to 15 million is probably where Jed wanted to be, assuming he can't go over the CBT. So just to lay that out, as we go through these, we have to take the player at the salary they actually signed for this offseason. So there's no saying I would have gone higher for so-and-so. And we're welcome to construct trades, but I have no idea how to do it, so I'm not going to. And I know Sara opted out last time, so we may be in the same boat. But any moves the Cubs did make, any of the trades the Cubs did make, we can keep or we can get rid of. And we can say, probably, I'll say the same for Gage Workman. given the Rule 5 thing. He would not have been on my radar at all to start the offseason, but now that since we're doing this now and he's on the table, we can keep him or let him go. So I guess to start, Sarah, like, given where the roster was at the end of last season, where they had Nick Madrigal and Patrick Wisdom and Miles Mastrobuoni and Alexander Canario, Luis Vasquez is kind of the depth behind the starting lineup. And then the bullpen that was a total mess the first couple months of the season and then got better at the end. Like, where would you have started to begin clearing space?
Well, so before we talk about clearing space, I mean, I want to maybe go to the elephant in the room, which is the Kyle Tucker trade, because I think that sort of like shapes
Fair. Yep.
the entire offseason. Like, if you do that trade or don't do that trade, like, I think we would agree there's some pretty huge roster implications, right? Like, both in terms of who's left in your system, in terms of what you need to fill, what you don't need to fill. Like, one of the reasons Alexander Canario becomes fungible in this current Cubs world is because you have so much depth at outfield that having a player like Canario, who really needs to play every day to establish himself as a major leaguer, as your fifth outfielder, no longer makes any sense, right? And so I think maybe starting with that as sort of a like, do we agree with it? And I'm going to guess that we do. It is sort of like a prior question for me, because if you don't do that move, then a lot of stuff looks different. And I just want to say, I think it was a brilliant move. I'm glad they made it. I never in a million years thought they'd be able to turn Isaac Paredes and Hayden Wesneski into Kyle Tucker. But I think that maybe the one question mark for me in that deal is the Cam Smith part of it, because we're watching Cam Smith play in the major leagues right now, which I don't think any of us thought we were going to see when that deal was made. So I'm a plus on the Kyle Tucker trade, and I'm just maybe curious. I don't even want to undo it necessarily. I understand why they traded Cam Smith instead of Matt Shaw, but it's like, man, that could hurt later. Like, the Cam Smith versus Matt Shaw question might haunt us for a few years yet.
Well, it's interesting to talk about this too, because there's been a lot of chatter this week about Kyle Tucker extension talks, which I would have thought were not on the table.
Lord.
We don't know really where this info is coming from or how good it is. If they extend Kyle Tucker, I care way, way less about Cam Smith, because Kyle Tucker is an elite hitter. I mean, top of the game. And so if that's the price to get him in your system, have this exclusive negotiation window, and have the chance to sell him on Chicago, I'm in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the Kyle Tucker being extended makes the rest of that trade fine, whether Cam Smith becomes a better player than Matt Shaw or not. I do want to dive in a little bit on the Cam Smith versus Matt Shaw comparison, though, just because I think it's kind of interesting. And obviously, you know, Cam Smith, a much less polished option than Matt Shaw at this point in time. He has less minor league experience, and the Cubs probably wanted to go with the player that they thought was a little bit closer to the big leagues. The Astros decided to give Cam Smith some runway there regardless. Obviously, it's a little bit skewed because the Cubs have played more games, but Matt Shaw has 61 plate appearances this year so far. Cam Smith has 36. They each have a home run. Cam Smith has one stolen base. Matt Shaw does not have a stolen base. But the three places that this really jumps out at me as, yes, Matt Shaw probably is the more polished player for now. And look, I don't know what happens when you compare the first 6 or 7 years of these guys' careers down the road. But I do think Cubs fans should take a deep breath here and know that they might have the more MLB-ready player right now. Matt Shaw is walking at almost double the rate Cam Smith is. Cam Smith walks at an 8.3% rate. Matt Shaw has been walking at a 16.4% rate. Matt Shaw strikes out a lot less than Cam Smith does. Cam Smith is striking out at a 30.6% clip. That is just not going to fly in Major League Baseball over a long term. Matt Shaw is striking out at a 23% rate, which is exactly what you would like to see from a young guy in his rookie season. And finally, I know a stat that probably needs a few more batted ball events in order to stabilize, but Cam Smith has a perfectly league average BABIP right now of 300, and he's putting together a 219, 306, 375 slash line off of that. Matt Shaw's BABIP, on the other hand, is 194, which indicates he's getting a little bit unlucky in that 157, 295, 235 slash line. And so while it looks like Matt Shaw's been a little bit overmatched so far, I would say that the underlying stats, the peripherals, as it were, look like Matt Shaw has a solid approach at the plate that will level out over time. And I'm curious if you agree that at least for this season, Matt Shaw probably puts up better numbers than Cam Smith over 1 year.
Yeah, I do. And I think that was another decision that played into what I decided to do with this offseason too, because the big question I had going in with third base, especially so again, to your point, I'm going to accept the Kyle Tucker trade. So that's part of my offseason move. So now third base is empty because Itzhak Paredes is gone.
Correct.
I was okay with the idea of giving Matt Shaw the position as long as he didn't have an abysmal spring or come out looking completely overmatched. Just because we've seen it. Like, these players have to start that development clock. They're going to struggle. So why save that struggle for later when you can do it now? And I kind of saw Matt Shaw and Cam Smith as similar versions of the same thing. I think Cam Smith has more power. I think Matt Shaw is going to be a better overall hitter potentially. But to your point, I think Matt Shaw was pretty much ready now, especially given the way the Cubs handled prospects. I don't think there's any scenario where Cam Smith would have been the starting third baseman this season. Nor do I actually even think that he necessarily should be. I think it's interesting what they're doing in Houston, but I'm not convinced, even with the spring he had, that he's ready. So we'll see where that goes. But that is one of my questions was, do I plug Shaw in at third base, save some money, let that start, and look for some depth? Or do I go find a third baseman? And the Cubs Jed clearly couldn't decide. I mean, I think he was good with Shaw all along, but then at the end there was the big pursuit of Bregman that was kind of like trying to be half pregnant.
The Bregman pursuit, and this is reading through some tea leaves, obviously, but I find that fascinating. So I was reading a piece on The Athletic from the Red Sox writers about how the Bregman stuff went down. One of the things that they mentioned in that piece is that Theo Epstein, who is currently a special assistant to the Red Sox, was one of the architects of how that deal ultimately got constructed. And now, this is me reading into that a bit. So some of this is just Sara Sanchez thinking about some stuff TM. But I do wonder how much Theo's knowledge of what the Cubs would do and what Jed is and is not able to offer allowed the Red Sox to put together a deal that the Cubs just could not match, right? Because I have rarely seen Jed Hoyer more disappointed than losing out on Alex Bregman. He doesn't usually show disappointment all that much. And those interviews that he did immediately after losing out on Bregman, he looked kind of sad, right? And to be clear, I thought that was a mistake on the Cubs' part. I couldn't figure out why they were so interested in Bregman. I mean, Bregman clearly fit like a glove at Fenway. He's just murdering the Green Monster. His hit profile, it is going to extend Bregman's utility and career to play for the Red Sox, and he's going to be very good there doing it. I don't think that profile plays at Wrigley with the deep wells at all. And I think that Bregman would have done better than Paredes in that park, but he would not be what he's doing in Fenway right now. However, I did think it was interesting that an individual who has intimate knowledge of how the Cubs make deals and how the Red Sox make deals basically was one of the architects of the deal that took a guy out of the Cubs' possible acquisitions and put him on the Red Sox.
And that was interesting too, because one thing we've seen over the years, and maybe sometimes it's just not that public, but going back to Theo's time, Jed hasn't really pursued big people, but for the most part, if the Cubs have gone after somebody big, like really gone after them, they tend to get them.
Yes.
And the Cubs lost out late on the Dodgers are kind of their own thing. So because the Cubs actually gave Tanner Scott more total present dollars than the Dodgers did. So I think it was a fine and competitive offer. But between losing him and Bregman, it's not something we see from the Cubs a lot.
Well, I think, and that's a great point. And in both of those instances, both with the Red Sox and with the Dodgers, the thing the Cubs could not match was the deferred money part of the whole bit, or the thing they wouldn't match, right? Like for whatever reason, I don't know why. I don't know why they won't. Maybe it's an ownership thing. Maybe it's a front office thing. We don't have any reporting that is publicly available as to why they would not do that. I do think that's an interesting potential crossroads for this team, because if the big top 5 franchises are willing to do those types of deals, structure them with a ton of opt-outs, structure them with like front-loaded money and back-loaded deferments and all that jazz, and the Cubs are out on that, I wonder if it puts them in a different tier of the class of free agents that they are going to sign. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. But it's something to keep an eye on going forward.
Well, and I still think with deferred money too, like the player, obviously the player opinion comes in because the player has to sign the deal too. I'm going to guess that obviously Juan Soto didn't want deferred money. And
Right.
what's been reported so far, if it's true with the Kyle Tucker extension talks, is no deferred money. So he might not want it either. So in some cases, maybe it doesn't matter if the player doesn't want it. But yeah, if the Cubs aren't willing to go there, then there probably is some competitive disadvantage there, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what, if anything, comes of the Kyle Tucker extension. Because if I'm the Cubs front office, he has been so good over the course of his career and so good already in a Cubs uniform. He lengthens that offense, right? Like if you go right now, and admittedly, we're in early days, right? We're in like the first tenth of the season type of situation. But if you go to Fangraphs right now and you sort, you go to like team leaders batting for 2025, at the very top is the Cubs, because they have, their offense has been worth 5.7 WAR already. And nobody else is particularly close. Like this Dodgers team that we're all like, oh my God, the best offense of all time. It's so crazy, blah, blah. They're at like 2.8, right? Like the Dodgers are the only other team that has played the same number of games as the Cubs. And the Cubs are lapping them on defensive and offensive value from their hitters. And that is not a thing that we've seen in the city of Chicago for a hot minute. And the difference there to my eye is Kyle Tucker, right? Like it takes some of the pressure of an Ian Happ or a Seiya Suzuki to be the star. And I mean, Dansby Swanson is having the season that I think the Cubs probably thought they were signing up for from Dansby Swanson when they made that deal 2 years ago.
Yes.
And it kind of got short-circuited by injuries and short-circuited by the park and the way it played last year. And all of a sudden we're seeing what Dansby Swanson can be. So I just think that Kyle Tucker fundamentally changes this lineup and roster. He fits really well with this particular team. And I hope that somebody at the corner of Clark and Addison is writing up an extension that starts, 11 years, 500 million. Like, I don't care. Just get it done. Like,
well,
and
the
highest
nice
contract ever, do it.
The nice thing is if they actually do it, there's been so much well-earned and deserved. The Cubs will never, Tom will never, Jed will never. They go out, if they actually sign him for 10, 12 years, $450+ million, that narrative's gone.
Yes.
Like the Cubs now have done it. It is now, I'm not saying they're going to go do 6 of them, but it is now theoretically in play. Like it's a bridge they've crossed. And that would be really nice just for next offseason to put behind and just say, take the Cubs will never do this off the table.
Absolutely.
So looking at that, so we both take the Kyle Tucker trade, which does set up some interesting discussions as we go through this.
Well, it means that at outfield, right? Like one, you have to determine what you're going to do with Bellinger. It also means that like, does Alexander Canario go? Probably yes. Does Mike Tauchman go? Probably yes. Like there's just a whole bunch of little like dominoes there that makes sense once you have 4 solid outfielders, including Kyle Tucker.
Yes. Well, especially when you factor in PCA and whether he's going to play center field. The one thing I decided to do is I decided to not accept the Yankees trade for Bellinger.
Okay.
I think with that, you have to do one of 2 things. You either keep Bellinger and your bench is now super strong and you're a lot deeper, because you're going to have either Bellinger, Happ, say Tucker, or PCA on your bench every day. I didn't really like the Yankees trade. I would have liked it a lot better if they'd have taken the $20 million they saved and turned that into like a top level starting pitcher. But without doing that, I know they have stuff at the deadline. Hopefully it'll work out and they'll get somebody at the deadline. But that does set up an interesting playing scenario, because you've got Bellinger who can play first base and center field. You've got 4 other outfielders, 4 of whom you already know they can hit. PCA you want to see a lot of in center field. So that was the one thing I struggled with. Like, what do I do with the Bellinger trade? And to that point, I decided not to take it. But what did you decide to do there?
So I keep the Bellinger trade, although I spend the money off the Bellinger trade.
You have to do one of the two.
Right now, the Cubs are just sitting on that money, right? Like it's not, they have spent parts of it, but they have not really invested it. So I guess let me back this up a bit. The difference is, do you want to invest like all of that money in a star or a mid-level star? Or do you want to like piecemeal it and like Justin Turner here and some John Birdie here and some Carson Kelly and like, so the difference is I spend the money. And
Fair.
maybe I spend the money now. I don't spend it at the trade deadline. I'm not waiting.
That's one of the reasons I picked my path, because I was pretty sure you were going to take that one, and this gave us a chance to talk about both of them and see how it interacts. But
sure.
So just to start, I cleared, obviously Smiley was gone from last year. Hendricks was gone from last year. Alzolay was not going to be a factor, whether they non-tendered him, traded him, or did whatever. I would have, just like they did, I would have declined Bodie's option, non-tender Brennan Davis, non-tender Nick Madrigal, Patrick Wisdom, just clear those bench spots out. I was back and forth on Mastroboni. We all know I like him better than everybody else, but you need, whatever they do with the roster, they have to have somebody who's going to take that essentially third shortstop spot, be able to float multiple positions and have speed, ideally hit left-handed. So to that point, I did keep Gage Workman, who became a better version, I hope, of Miles Mastroboni. So that was the end of Mastroboni on my roster. And that kind of left me with 1, 2, 3, 4, really 5 free agent spots is what I was filling. What did you wind up doing kind of with the roster to open up spots for free agents?
So, and admittedly, this is going to look like a bad idea 16 games into the season because Carson Kelly has been raking. But I do not believe in the Carson Kelly offensive explosion. Like I don't know why that's happening right now. Godspeed to the man. He's got like a WRC plus of 311 right now, but I just don't think that's sustainable.
No.
So I take the Carson Kelly money and I turn that into Travis d'Arnaud instead. Travis d'Arnaud signed with the Angels for $500,000 more in the same number of years that Carson Kelly did. So spending a little bit more money for a much better proven offensive backstop. The other thing that you get with Travis d'Arnaud that I do not think you get with Carson Kelly, which is a weakness the Cubs have right now, admittedly one that doesn't look like it's a weakness yet, but it will be, I promise, is d'Arnaud is a better defensive catcher than either Miguel Amaya or Carson Kelly. He's also been he's got a longer track record as an offensive catcher, right? And so that allows you to have two catchers basically splitting time 50-50 with d'Arnaud and Miguel Amaya. And you have a guy who you feel very confident can take a 60-40, 70-30 split there if Amaya struggles. And I just don't feel like the Cubs have that right now. I feel like they're kind of out on a limb they need one of Miguel Amaya or Carson Kelly to play above the station that you think they would play right now. And I think that could come back to bite them later. So I invested a little bit more money at catcher with Travis d'Arnaud instead of Carson Kelly. And again, I admit that looks bad right now because Carson Kelly's on fire. But I'm sorry,
season.
y'all. Hit me up on Memorial Day and let's see what Carson Kelly is.
Right. Well, and I took a similar approach. So obviously the Cubs had to get a backup catcher. I looked at d'Arnaud. I wound up going, I didn't take Carson Kelly either. I was kind of high on Kyle Higashioka.
Okay.
So I liked him, again, similar money, about $1 million more than Carson Kelly. So again, I spent a little bit more there. I like his track record. I think he's better defensively than Kelly or Amaya. And he's got not as much proven hitting history as d'Arnaud, but he's certainly a capable catcher with the bat. So I think we went in a similar direction there. What'd you do? I guess let's flip it. So we both had pitching as big needs.
Yeah.
What did you do in the starting rotation?
I'm actually, hold please. I was about to go bullpen with my next talking point.
We can start bullpen. Let's start bullpen.
Sorry.
No problem.
So here's the thing with the bullpen. I feel like they went out and they got a number of guys who are like mid-tier, kind of interesting. Eli Morgan, Caleb Thielbar, also guys that could just really blow up. And what I feel like this team is missing is a couple of guys who are proven at the back end of the bullpen who can really hold down that spot if Porter Hodge can't do it. I probably would not have done the Ryan Presley trade. I don't believe in Ryan Presley as a closer at this stage in his career. Like, no shade to the dude. He's had a great career, but I think we've already seen hints of it in his brief time with the Cubs. Like the strikeout stuff, the swing and miss stuff is not there the way that it has been in the past. I know curveballs age a little bit better than other pitches, but I'm not seeing Ryan Presley as a long-term closer here. And so I took some of the money that went into Colin Ray and into Justin Turner, both of whom I'm going to take a pass on and get other guys later. And I instead go out and I get Chris Martin and Ryan Stanek, who cost together about $10.5 million. So you're actually saving about $1.5 million. You're not getting a Colin Ray, right? And so like I will concede off the top, like you're missing that swingman role there.
Yep.
We're going to go get a cheaper guy for that later. But you are getting two guys in Chris Martin and in Ryan Stanek, who I believe are elite level relievers who can slot into that 7-8 role and really lengthen your bullpen.
Yeah, and I did not have Chris Martin much on my radar, but I didn't go for Ryan Stanek, but he was definitely on my list. What I went for is I thought coming in, I was okay with letting Porter Hodge close. He looked really good last year. I think the stuff plays. But I needed somebody with some backup. I needed a lefty, hopefully one better than Caleb Thielbar, and needed at least one guy who could step in and close if Porter Hodge struggled. So I went bigger. I went, one guy I really wanted from the start of the offseason was AJ Minter from the Braves. And I would have spent the $11 million on him. And then I also went for Carlos Estevez from Philly for 11.1. So that's a lot more money in the bullpen than Jed was going to go for, although he did put the big offer out to Tanner Scott, which is very out of character. I don't think I would have done the Tanner Scott thing. I personally am not a huge fan of paying big money to free agent closers, but yeah.
And then the guy that I go for that starting pitcher role, since I didn't spend the money on Colin Ray, and I believe Colin Ray is 6 or 7. I think he's 6.
Yeah.
$6 million, $5 million, sorry, $5 million guy. I cheap out a little bit here, and I go $3.5 million for Cal Quantrill instead. So I take some of that savings that I got by not by signing 2 bullpen guys instead of a bullpen guy and a first base DH type. I put it back into pitching, and now I think I'm plus 1.5 million or plus 2 million, but I got 3 players in that three players in Chris Martin, Ryan Stanek, and Cal Quantrill that I think solidify and shore up the rotation and the bullpen. I have eschewed Justin Turner. I'm not going to platoon Michael Busch. I'm going to just let Michael Busch learn how to hit lefties and let Saya be the DH and rely on the Cubs farm system for depth in the first base DH land if they need it. And I have replaced functionally Colin Ray and who's the other guy I said? Sorry, I'm going back and forth between here and Spot Track. I replaced Colin Ray and Justin Turner, basically.
Yes. So on the starting rotation, I went the other direction. Instead of getting cheap, I went for a bigger name. The one I was really interested in the Cubs chasing. I was interested in Shane Bieber. I probably would have been maybe my top choice, but since he stayed home with Cleveland, I think he even signed his deal before in that 5-day exclusive negotiating window. So I don't think he was ever really on the table. I went with Walker Buehler. I would have spent the $21 million to go get him. It's 1 year coming off. He looked good at the end of last season when he pitched. And then you could walk into the season or potential playoff series with Tyone as your 4 behind however you want to slot them, Justin Steele, Walker Buehler, Shota Imanaga. I love that rotation. Then I don't care if it's Javier Assad, Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, those guys fighting for the 5th spot.
Let me ask you a question here, because I kept Matthew Boyd. And to be clear, I kept Matthew Boyd before I saw what he was doing this offseason. Actually,
Yes.
I kind of like that signing. I think it's a little bit sneaky, but I think of Matthew Boyd as a Drew Smiley type. Like, I think the Cubs are going to get 80 to 85 innings out of Matthew Boyd, and they're going to be great. And then I think Matthew Boyd is going to turn into a pumpkin. I think it's going to be one of those situations where Matthew Boyd maybe becomes a reliever by like July or August, but you're hoping that a Cade Horton is ready to step in there. You're hoping that like somebody else comes up in your system. Ben Brown has been excellent so far. Like, I think that the Cubs have enough depth that you sort of like Matthew Boyd is your April to June starter, and then you just kind of start moving things around. I admit, $29 million over 2 years for a guy who is basically a number 3 for half a season that's a little bit hefty.
Yeah, on that one, I decided not to go that direction, mostly because until the Cubs got him, he really wasn't much on my radar. I like what I see. Once they did sign him and I looked into it, I like the signing. Like you, I think that starting pitcher market went higher than I expected, but I think I say that every offseason, so I should just expect it to be much higher next year. The one thing I didn't like that the Cubs did this year is I think the Cubs have a lot of interesting young arms, guys they picked up in the bullpen last year, guys coming through the system, whether it's Cade Horton. I know Birdsell's hurt, but we've got him. We've got Javier Assad, Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Jackson Wiggins is the one we still have, and he's coming soon, probably a year or two away. The Cubs this year, because they went for so many low-tier guys to really build out that depth, as they tend to do, I think they were kind of maybe overly restricting the chances some of the young guys are going to get. I sort of understand why, because reading fans' opinions, it's kind of goes one way or the other. We want a bunch of stars, or I want the kids to play. And Jed's trying to thread a needle. We'll see how well he does. But that's why I decided to go like a Walker Buehler and go top end on the bullpen with like AJ Minter and Carlos Estevez versus getting 2 starters or 3 or 4 relievers that then push guys to AAA. Yeah. And how well these guys pitch will come down to how good of a strategy that was. But that was my thinking on it.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. I mean, I could see either one of those working out. But I do like that both of us have some slightly different starting, pitching, relieving strategies, because that's going to give us something to talk about at the end of the season when we go to this. Let me ask you a question. Because one guy I did not sign, and again, admittedly, like starting off fine, but like I'm out, is John Birdie. I feel like the Cubs already through the offseason moves that they made have the depth that they need at third base to back up Matt Shaw. I actually kind of hate that they went and picked up Gage Workman in the Rule 5 draft, and as far as I can tell, he never plays. Like, what is the point? The guy, he's an intriguing bat, he's an intriguing glove, and he's just not playing at all because he's like 4th on the depth chart in terms of being the replacement for Nico or Dansby or Matt Shaw. And I like what I've seen from Gage Workman so far. I am intrigued, and I would like to see more of it. And I feel, John Birdie, I get it. Like, he's a very versatile player. He's a good defender. He can steal some bags. But I don't know, man, $3 million a year for a guy to block a young guy who could be better than John Birdie is really annoying me.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. And that's where I like either Birdie or Workman. I see the value of having that spot on the team, but getting both just plays into more of this roster madness where the Cubs often have these combinations of players that don't make any sense together. Like, I could see, I talked about it for years, but Patrick Wisdom and Nick Madrigal on the same roster never made any sense at all. If you want to go contact and have Madrigal, fine. If you want to go power and have Wisdom, fine. But they're just too redundant and they don't give you enough stuff. You're basically trying to create one player out of 2 roster spots.
Totally agree. I mean, I'm looking at this right now, and you've got John Birdie has 19 plate appearances so far. And look, he's been good. 294, 368, 294. He's already stolen 5 bags. But like, Gage Workman has 10 plate appearances this season. I don't know what Gage Workman is. I don't know if he's going to be great. I don't know if he's going to be mediocre. I don't know if he's like a Zach McKinstry type or if he's better than that. But like, you have to play him to find out.
Yes.
And as a Rule 5 pickup, he is basically now just kind of, he's in like limbo, right? Like, there's no spot for him to play. He only comes in when the game's like 13-0, like it was yesterday. I hate it.
Well, and the one thing I would like to see, I don't know what Detroit would want, but the Cubs could work out a trade where they can just basically take, whether it's money, whether it's a low-level prospect, send something to Detroit to finish the trade, then they can option Workman. But one way or another, to your point, the guy has to be able to play at some point. And I thought that this year would be a year where Counsell had better depth and had more guys he liked on the bench and would play guys. And so far, it still seems like the last guy on the bench never plays. Doesn't matter if it's Madrigal, Mastroboni, Wisdom, now Workman, that guy just doesn't play.
I mean, I was fine with like Mastroboni and Wisdom not getting a chance, like a long look, right? It's like got a 30-year-old guy who's been DFA'd by a handful of teams, and yes, there's light tower power, but there's also a 30% strikeout rate, and it makes a ton of sense that like Patrick Wisdom is just kind of your last guy on the bench. I'm okay if that guy is Mike Tauchman, right? Like Mike Tauchman is just not playing, and he's kind of a journeyman outfielder, spent some time in Korea, came back, he's an on-base machine. I like Mike Tauchman a lot, but like if Mike Tauchman's not getting playing time, whatever. Gage Workman is a 25-year-old kid who could be really good. And it's like, why are we relegating him to that spot when everything that we've seen looks like a guy who should get more of a look there? And I really don't like Gage Workman not playing.
Agree. So the last spot I filled was my bench. I had one more bench spot. And I went into this and I tried to take spring training out. We were going to do this episode weeks ago and just couldn't make schedules work. But one guy I was interested in if I was going to start Matt Shaw at third base was Yohan Moncada.
Okay.
So he's the guy I picked up as the bench depth. I guess he's kind of that John Birdie, but he can play more position, not more positions than John Birdie, but kind of fill that role. And then if Matt Shaw does struggle, you got a guy who has done it in the majors before that could plug in at third base. Still have the same issue with Gage Workman though. Like, how is he going to work it and play? But that's the direction I had decided to go with that position.
Yeah, I like that. I went a different way for the last spot on my bench, and I admit that I went back and forth between two guys. But my last bat is Ty France. I think Ty France is he was not good. Seattle, he's had some rough seasons.
Yes.
But Ty France has had like some interesting offensive upside. Recently, he cost $1 million.
Yes.
And that is a corner guy who can DH and fill in if he has to, if anybody is hurt. I think that for pure value reasons, and admittedly, I went back and forth on this. I know what they're doing with Justin Turner. I mean, it seems pretty obvious if you listen to a Marquee Sports Network broadcast. They view Justin Turner as like this savvy vet on the bench who can set the tone and culture. I mean, they talk all the time about like, I feel like Marquee wants to start a buddy comedy with like Pete Crow Armstrong and Justin Turner. They keep bringing it up all the time. Look at him following Justin Turner around. Da, 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 da. Fine, whatever. I wish they would have kept the buddy comedy that was Wilson Contreras and Christopher Morel, which was a much better show in my opinion. But that's fine.
Yes.
I know we'll never see eye to eye on that. I don't understand. Actually, it seems like this team abandoned their own team culture and they're trying to borrow from other team cultures, right? And Justin Turner is a guy who has experience with the Dodgers and he was, great player with the Blue Jays. And like, I get it. But if you're going to spend $6 million to bring back a culture guy and to like try to set the stage, why is Anthony Rizzo still a free agent? Like, couldn't we have done that? I don't know, man. Like, I get that doesn't work with the platoon splits that they're trying to do with Bush and all this stuff. But like, I don't know. Why couldn't we have gone to Cubs culture? And Jed Hoyer, whatever. Like, we will never see eye to eye on players, but I find trying to turn the team into the Justin Turner Cubs and like sell me on Justin Turner as like this great character guy it's a stretch. I don't dislike the guy. He's fine, but if at the end of the season there's a non-zero chance that Ty France was just a better player in that exact same role than Justin Turner head to head all season, and he cost $5 million less, which allowed me to get much better relievers.
Yes. No, I tried hard to find a way to bring Rizzo back onto this roster. Because I made the decision to keep Bellinger, there really wasn't a place.
Sure.
Because the only way
I got rid of Bellinger.
The only way to keep Bellinger is he has to play some first and some outfield and some DH. But I don't know. Even if I let him go, like you said, it's tough with the splits and what they want to do with Bush. But if there was any way to bring Rizzo home and let him finish his career in Chicago, I'm totally down for it. So that left me money-wise total with about $6.9 million left for deadline moves, which is fine. You can do some stuff for that at the deadline. Where did you wind up?
I think I wound up at about 6.5 because I'm over on my relievers. I also think I was not quite as precise as you were. I was just kind of like moving guys back and forth. So I should probably do like an actual spreadsheet to be sure.
It's fine.
I might be closer to 5, but I'm still fine with it.
But we're both, I mean, clearly with the people we picked up, we're both clearly within that money.
Yeah.
Obviously, clearing Bellinger lets you spend more than I was able to spend.
Yes.
But yeah, I think this was fun. I think it'd be good. We should do this next year as the
actually,
offseason.
I don't know if I counted all the Bellinger money. I might be way under. I will get you a number from that because I think I might be way under. But
I think next year would be fun to start the offseason. Like, who would we go after in free agency, and then see what the Cubs actually do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the things I would like us to do here, maybe revisit this at the trade deadline. And because that's the next time that a lot of players are going to move either onto or off of this roster and just sort of see what happens here. It's an interesting exercise, like be the front office with the constraints that the front office has and see what you wind up with.
It is. And you toss around, you have to deal with the fact that Julian Merriweather, even though he didn't pitch last year, got an arbitration raise, and Nate Pearson cost more money than he did last year. And so even though those little bits start to add up when you're talking about getting down to the end and having $6 million versus $5 million left at the deadline can make a difference on whether or not you get a guy. Although maybe the Cubs don't. Maybe the Cubs don't care because they'll go over by $10 again and pay some non-penalty and just be stupid.
That was unbelievably silly. And I might
really
never
was.
get over it.
Yep. So let's go through the roster. What did you have for starting rotation?
So my starting rotation is Justin Steele, please be okay, Shota Imanaga, Jameson Taillon, Matthew Boyd, and then some combination of Cal Quantrill, Javier Assad, Ben Brown, Cade Horton, that whole crew. And I'm just pulling, I don't have a Colin Ray on my team. I don't have that middle relief guy who's going to take all those innings.
So I had Steele, Walker Buehler, Imanaga, Taillon. I plugged Assad into that last spot, but again, it's Assad, it's Brown, Wicks, whoever. I didn't sign anybody else for that. And then your bullpen, did you have Hodge closing?
I do have Hodge closing, but I have Hodge closing with the backups of Ryan Stanek and Chris Martin, both of whom have closing experience and who I think are better pitchers than Ryan Presley at this point in his career. I have eschewed... I did not pick up Caleb Tealbar, and I did not do the Eli Morgan move.
Yeah, it was the same. I didn't do Tealbar or Morgan. I had Hodge closing backed up by AJ Minter and Carlos Estevez. And then I had Merriweather, Miller, Pearson, give Keegan Thompson one last run. Although the one thing I thought about, the Ryan Brazier pickup at the end.
Yeah.
I do like those opportunistic little the Dodgers are adding so many good players, they actually have to let a pretty decent player go. Just being down to $6 million, I didn't want to drop 4.5 on Brazier at that point. But with where the Cubs were and the money they have left, I actually like that move. But I was basically filling out the rest of the bullpen from within.
Yeah, same. I've got just the guys that you're gonna put on the Iowa shuttle back and forth and.
Yep.
Tyson Miller, all these guys, and admittedly, some of those guys are hurt right now, just kind of filling in those back end bullpen spots. I'm just double checking roster resource really quick. Yeah, keep Merriweather, keep Pearson, Ethan Roberts. I just basically no longer have Tealbar and I no longer have Morgan. I probably would have kept Keegan Thompson around. I guess he becomes my long man, but I have a lot of depth at that number 5 spot, right? Like you can easily slot Ben Brown into the bullpen or into the rotation. You can easily slot Javier Assad the same way. I'm curious to see what the Cubs do when Javi comes back because he's always been a better starting pitcher than a reliever. And Ben
Yep.
Brown looks really good in the rotation right now. So I think they're gonna have some pressure on the rotation, hopefully because Justin Steele is only gonna miss 15
Yes.
days. And his second
Hopefully.
opinion is gonna be excellent. And I don't have to worry
Yes.
about Justin Steele.
It's such a shame too, because Steele looked so good his last
He
start.
looked so good. It
It wasn't
I'm
even
gonna
the
be real
results. He
heartbroken
really
if he's
looked
not okay.
good.
He looked
Oh, I know.
great. I'm well, and he's coming. He had Tommy John in 2017, so
Yep.
he should be. He's in like his 8th year of recovery there. I'm just really hoping he does not get a bad second opinion.
I agree. I think we both had pretty much the starting lineup basically stays the same. We were both plugging in Matt Shaw. We both kept Kyle Tucker, correct?
Correct. Although I went, I've got Travis D'Arnaud on my team instead of Carson Kelly, and that
Yep.
might mean that Miguel Amaya has slightly fewer plate
No.
appearances because you'd probably play D'Arnaud over Miguel Amaya. And again, that is as much a defensive move for me as it is an offensive move. I think D'Arnaud is better at controlling the running game in particular, and I
No doubt.
do think that is going to catch up to the Cubs at some point this season. Miguel Amaya was not good at controlling the running game last year.
No, and the only changes that I made is I picked up Kyle Higashioka instead of D'Arnaud. I was kind of expecting Higashioka and Amaya to be kind of a split. I guess whoever plays better maybe plays more. Higashioka is a little better defensively, not as good as D'Arnaud. And then my bench additions were I kept the Workman move and I added Yohan Moncada.
Yeah, I kept Workman. I don't have Justin Turner. I have Ty France. And I don't have John Birdie. So that spot is probably either a minor leaguer at this moment in time or, I guess Vidal Brujan's hurt. So yeah, they'd probably have to pull somebody up from the minors for that.
I guess one question for your outfield, since you did not keep Bellinger,
Yeah.
did you keep either Tauchman or Canario?
Well, so let's see. The outfield then is Ian Happ, Pete Crow Armstrong, Kyle Tucker, Seiya Suzuki is my 4th outfielder. And then probably would have kept Canario.
Yeah,
But
I
Canario's
think
not
that's
playing at that point, which makes me... I would keep Canario over Tauchman for sure.
agree. Yeah, less money and got to see what the kid can do.
Yeah. I mean, Canario right now is 1 injury away from consistent playing time with the Pirates. And
Yes.
I'm real curious to see what that back can do. I was checking in on Canario for my fantasy baseball writing gig the other day, and he's only striking out like 26% of the time. The big knock on Canario has always been the strikeout rate.
Mm-hmm.
If he strikes out 26% of the time and hits with the power that he's demonstrated, that's a 25-30 home run bat.
Yes.
And he can play, he can play in the outfield. He's not a superstar in the outfield, but he looks okay. So I don't wish injury on anyone, but I do kind of want the Pirates to be forced to give Canario a real look.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's one of those guys that just needs a chance. Every time he played, he did pretty well. Ks are high and all that, but I like to see it. The Cubs are definitely deep in the outfield, so I definitely had to move on. But
yeah.
So this was fun. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for doing this with me. Next year, I'm gonna have a whole chart like you do, and I'll be able to be like, I saved $5.73 million. But
mine's a mess. I wound up taking my 2023 and my 2025 and like mashing it together, and all of a sudden I was like, oh no, I have 3 players I couldn't possibly have because the Cubs got rid of them last year. But in the end, it worked out. But no, this is fun. Thanks for coming on, and you'll definitely be back on the show at some point.
And we'll revisit this midway through the season and at the end of the season. We'll hold ourselves accountable here. So,
For sure.
If Ryan Stanek turns into a pumpkin and Cal Quantrill's out of the league in June, I've got to be held accountable for that.
I got to look in, my kids play MLB The Show. I got to look and see if I can actually sim this out. That would be fun to do too.
That would be fun. I agree.
Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah.
Speaking of former Cubs who are mashing, can I just say, Kyle Schwarber has 6 home runs before tax day. Kyle Schwarber in a contract year could be a beast. I think sitting like 295, which admittedly is not going to last. But man, It's fun to watch Kyle Schwarber just absolutely rake in a contract year.
Yes. Everything worked out the worst way possible with him at almost every turn except for the World Series. I mean, came smashing in, got hurt. The thing I'm actually the most mad about is if the Cubs were going to take this path with Kyle Schwarber, they could have gotten so much for him after 2015 or 2016.
I mean, one of my original like counterfactual what could have gone differently. I wrote a piece for Bleed Cubbie Blue maybe 3 or 4 years ago that what if the Cubs had traded Kyle Schwarber straight up for 2 years of Andrew Miller instead of Gleyber Torres plus for Aroldis Chapman. And like I actually think that just sets in motion a whole series of different things that I would have missed Kyle Schwarber on the Cubs. Like obviously that, he doesn't come back then in Game 7 of the World Series, but maybe you're not dealing with Aroldis Chapman being unable to throw his fastball in the 9th inning. And, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that happens there.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that was just such a missed opportunity to either keep him or that's one thing that Jed has not really done. He's not capitalized on the top prospects. They wind up keeping them until they show they can't play, like Albert Almora, or non-tender them too early or whatever. But hopefully this current class with PCA, Alcantara, some of those guys, and Casey will pan out.
Kyle Schwarber is hitting 288, so he must have had a little bit of an off day yesterday. He was in
that'll
the
drop by
290s when I saw him in Atlanta.
Somehow that's going to drop by 100 points, and he's still going to hit 50 home runs.
He might hit 50. I mean, I think of him as 40 at a lock. It's like 40 home runs going to happen
for sure. Well, where can people find you, Sarah?
Oh, all over the place. At BCB_Sarah on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. At BCB Sarah over on Blue Sky, where the skies are in fact bluer. My writing's at bleedcubbieblue.com for the Cubs and at Baseball HQ for fantasy stuff. You can find me all over the place.
Great. Well, it was great having you on, and can't wait to have you on again.
Yeah, have a good one.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this episode, please drop a rating and a review wherever it is you get your podcasts, and share the episode with a friend. Just a few seconds from you gives me great feedback and helps other Cub fans find the show. You can find me on Twitter or X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus. And check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/bleacherbunch to help support all of our shows. As always, the theme music for this podcast is Prospect Park West by Jerry McCoy. This is Mike Waller, host of the CubsPS Plus podcast. Every day with Cubs baseball, we're talking about Cubs baseball is a great day. Go Cubs!